Hello, my name is Hena Mehta, and my research is titled A Comparative Analysis of Sentencing Practices, the US and Portugal. I would like to start off my presentation by talking a little bit about the inspiration behind this research project. So figure 1 shows the incarceration rates per 100,000 for the US and Portugal in 2000, 2010, and 2017. So as you can see, the gap between the two countries is quite large, and this large gap prompted me to question why the incarceration rates varied so much. I would like to talk about two differences that caught my attention regarding the US and Portugal sentencing practices. The first one is plea bargaining. So plea bargaining is best characterized as the practice in which prosecutors encourage defendants to plead guilty for a lesser charge to avoid the risk of trial, as well as a larger or harsher sentence. About 90 to 95% of cases are determined by plea bargaining in the US. However, in contrast, most European countries actually believe plea bargaining is quite unethical. In fact, in Portugal, they implement certain prosecutorial diversion tactics, which focuses more on case dropping rather than sentence negotiations, which is completely different than the US. Secondly, I would like to talk about the difference I found regarding sentence length. So in order to better understand this difference, I wanted to look at murder. So Article 131 of the Portuguese Code of Criminal Procedure actually outlines the statutory range for murder to be the lower bound of 8 years and the upper bound of 16 years. So as we can see, from 2013 to 2017, the US's average sentence length was above Portugal's upper bound of 16 years, and they range from approximately 18 to 24 years, which is quite shocking. So here we see Portugal's emphasis on offender rehabilitation by considering less incarceration time for arguably one of the most heinous crimes one can be sentenced for. Now I would like to talk a little bit about the imprisonment length for two drug-related crimes in the US, drug trafficking and simple possession. So as for drug trafficking, the average imprisonment length from 2000 to 2017 ranged from approximately 70 to 85 months. Additionally, 95 to 97% of offenders received imprisonment as a punishment for trafficking, which is suggestive of the US's nature to resort to incarceration as firsthand punishment. As for simple possession, the average imprisonment length from 2000 to 2017 ranged from a little under 5 months to approximately 20 months. Additionally, 39 to 88% of offenders received imprisonment as a punishment for simple possession, again, suggestive of the US's implementation of incarceration and its utilization as punishment. So if we were to ask the question to incarcerate or not to incarcerate, the US almost always includes the option of incarceration as a form of offender punishment for its people for drug-related crimes. Now I would like to turn to Portugal's study of drug crimes. From 1990 to 1999, arrests in Portugal for public drug use went up drastically, and in 2000, the total drug offenses peaked to almost 14,276. And not to mention, Portugal's per 100,000 incarceration rate reached 145, which was the highest in Western Europe. Then Portugal decided to pass a decriminalization law in 2001, which decriminalized the acquisition, possession, and use of small quantities of all psychoactive drugs. About 9 years later, we can see the impact of this legislation. So in terms of punishment for drug trafficking in Portugal, 28% resulted in prisoner incarceration, 48% in probation, and 30% in fines, which is indicative of Portugal's nature to resort to offender rehab and focus on offender rehab rather than resorting to incarceration as a punishment for drug offenses. As for policy implications and closing remarks, I believe that the US must work towards a rehabilitative model rather than resorting to incarceration. The medical model approach used in Portugal views drug crimes as a result of addiction that is resolved through rehab, not incarceration. This is something that the US fails to acknowledge. The US's implementation of mandatory minimums results in the increase of prisoners, prison overcrowding, and numerous economic consequences that arises with the decision to incarcerate. My initial research question was challenging and seeing what is causing discrepancy with sentencing and incarceration. I conclude that applications of different legal models produce varying attitudes in how often each country resorts to incarceration for offender punishment. I found that Portugal focuses more on rehab, and the US focuses more on incarceration. Their different legal models produce different attitudes in how often their country resorts to incarceration for offender punishment. Thank you so much.